All right, John, if you could experience any movie for the very first time again, which movie would you choose?
Oh, this is not fair because
I know, I was like already starting to think of movies.
there are so many movies that I think about a lot. When I think about movies that I had like a visceral reaction to, honestly, the first one that comes to mind is Jurassic Park.
That's a great movie.
So when I was really, really young, like maybe like 4 or 5, I was born in 91, but I only saw the movie much, much later. I have a vivid memory of the movie being put on, and the beginning scene is the transporting of a velociraptor into its enclosure. And there's like an attack, and things go wrong, and it's really, really, really scary. I remember running from the living room, running up to the second floor of my room, and screaming out of the window, "Please turn the movie off." And I think, back then, certainly that would have been like a huge, like, and I wasn't able to watch the movie until I was like 12, all the way through. And because it's a great movie, I'm glad that I actually was able to make it through at some point. But to go back to that point where the movie really truly gripped me and frightened me, I kind of want to go back to that moment because I love feeling big emotions, and that's why I love movies so much. So I think that's probably my answer.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
How about you?
If I could experience any movie for the first time again, this is a tough one because I have like 10 million movies. I guess I'm just going to go with my instinct, which was the first movie that came to me was Singing in the Rain. And it's only for that one scene where he's actually singing in the rain. And
Right,
it's
right.
it's just something about that scene. I think that made it one of my favorite movies. It was just the innocence around the dancing, the rain. And I know this might sound very cheesy, but it was just like this magical feeling of cinema it sort of created, and I know it's been like an epic, iconic moment in film history. But I don't know, it was just something, the simplicity of it. Like you didn't need all this, all this fancy schmancy stuff. It was just that feeling I think that it instilled in people, and then I don't know, just makes you feel happy. So I
Yeah.
think that it was more for that moment for me. And I mean I liked the movie anyways, but that's the most iconic scene for me. That's always kind of just stayed with me for that reason. What's the most important piece of advice you can give to anyone who is thinking of moving to Hamilton?
Find people. Go to where people are and just talk to them, because I think that Hamilton is constantly changing. I think that like with the housing situation being what it is, people are moving to Hamilton all the time. I've met people from outside of Hamilton more in my 30s and my late 20s than I did when I was growing up, and I think a big part of going to any place for me is to going where people are. So personally, when I go to a new place, even if I'm just visiting for a day, I love to go to a library, and I love to talk to people who are working at the library or people who are taking programs at
I
the
love that.
library, because that is the one place where you can go and it's not expected of you to buy anything, it's not expected of you to believe anything. You're just going there to meet the perfect cross section of people who want to be in their own community and want to share space with their community members. So I think that that's the most important thing is coming to Hamilton is, I love Hamilton. I was born and raised here. And I think that it's important for people who are coming here to meet people from here, because we're
Agreed.
a lot more than what people might think just looking from the outside looking in.
Definitely. One thing I would say to anyone who's thinking of moving to Hamilton, I would say, kind of to piggyback off what you said, is you will definitely find a community here. I think Hamilton is I mean, I grew up same here, born and raised, and one thing I've always seen from growing up is Hamilton is such a diverse community. If you go to North Hamilton versus the Mountain versus Westdale, there's just there's such a different feel and a different vibe in each community. And I think if people took the time to like just visit Hamilton, like you said, talk to people, research, you will absolutely find a community. It's just a matter of hooking into it and exploring and seeing, which area sort of fits the vibe of what you're looking for. but absolutely, I feel like anyone and everyone could fit in this community. It's very welcoming, it's very inclusive, and yeah, I think that's what I would say. And then actually, another thing I would say too is I have a lot of people that I meet, through art and other things, and they'll always say, "Oh, I'm always told to just drive through Hamilton, to just pass Hamilton." So the other thing would be don't drive through. Stop and explore the city and like give it a chance.
Yeah. To change immediately in this city.
I think I'm just going to go with what we were talking about. I would say homelessness is a huge, huge one. I mean, I remember growing up and it was an issue anyways, but I think more so now, especially since the pandemic. And I think, we talk about having housing and housing options as well, but there's definitely a lack of affordable housing and options for people to be able to tap into in that regard. So I think for me, that would be one of the most important things. Everybody deserves to have a place to call home, whatever that may look like, to a place to lay their head down at night where they don't have to worry about, anything. And it's just like that safe space. Everyone deserves a safe space.
Yeah, and I think that part of the rapid fire questions we had earlier was about ending war versus ending poverty. I think that poverty is a war on the human spirit.
Agreed.
And I think that, combating poverty unlocks so many doors for people to just not be in constant survival mode. And I think that like a
So
lot
true.
of the sort of problems that houseless people face, they have like these intergenerational effects, and that's what causes not just this sort of epidemic of social unrest, but also like the continuing of the chain of that cycle, right? And so I think, yeah, for sure, housing is so important, and I think it's really, since I was very young, I don't think there's been an issue that's faced that's been at the forefront of my mind more than poverty and houselessness.
Yeah, rooted in that. Agreed. Can you share a time when you experienced a microaggression?
Oh boy. It's so funny. Microaggressions are the most agonizing thing because when they happen, there's always that one split second where you're like, no, I'm just making it up.
Mm.
Like you
You think
gaslight
it's in your
yourself.
head, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, was that a microaggression or not? And I think, gosh, there have been so many microaggressions in my life. I think probably one of the biggest ones that I've ever faced was just um, working at a retail location and being called chief all the time. I think
I'm so
that
sorry.
it's so loaded, and it feels like maybe it's just a thing that everybody does. I see it on TV,
But it's
TV.
so disrespectful. Like,
Yeah, and I think that it comes from, like there's this part of me that wants to give the benefit of the doubt and wants to pass on that sort of like goodwill to other people and saying like, oh, it's just a thing that everybody calls everybody, but it's has this particular flavor that I feels like if I leave it unexamined, it becomes something that I become used to.
mhm.
And so, but is that something I want? Do I want to become used to it, or do I want to change that behavior or say something, and in the end, usually it's too late for me to say something. And I think, most of the time I feel like in the art space, I haven't really encountered that sort of like overtness, but I have sort of felt like, you know, there have been many times where I feel perceived as just this indigenous person, and it sometimes has manifested in more subtle ways. I've been asked, do I work here while I'm fully sitting behind the desk at an art gallery,
Oh my gosh.
and I'm wearing like a lanyard with the keys to the building around on
So
them.
enough to show that like you belong in that space.
100%. And I think that that's just something that I will always have to face. It's just like that level of sort of like hesitancy on the part of other people. How about you?
Yeah, it's lots as well. I'm just as you were talking was relating to so much of what you were sharing. I had a job a while ago, and I did have a microaggression where I had a supervisor that would constantly, our manager that made me second guess myself and my work, like the quality of what I was putting forward. It was a topic I was very passionate about. I was creating some learning material, and yeah, I would, and I had worked in that place for quite a while. So I had, was very close with my colleagues and the other people that were in the building. And so naturally, if something would happen, I would know. So I found out that my manager was getting newer people that had just come. And I'm not saying because I'm seasoned, I'm like any kind of expert. By no stretch of the imagination am I claiming to be any kind of expert. But I know it was a topic I had knowledge on, and I had done some work on that topic, and creating that learning material. And my manager was getting my colleagues to like check my work, the quality, to vet it, to like make sure it was up to par, all these kinds of things. And that was and it wasn't from an ego place. Like it wasn't from a place of ego, like, oh, my ego took a hit. Like, I don't care about that. It was just, I've been doing this work for a long time. I know for sure what I did a lot of research. I put my best foot forward. I consulted with, subject matter experts. So, I'm okay for feedback. Like we can take feedback, but it was the way it was done. I think if it was more of a conversation, or just say, hey, like, maybe you can tap into these folks, get a different perspective, or that sort of thing. I'm all for a collaborative process, but because that happened more than once, it felt like I don't know. It just felt like a bit of a slight,
Yeah.
and it, honestly, like what you said, you almost like start to gaslight yourself. So in a way, I started to like question myself. I'm like, did I not do a good job, or did I miss the boat on something, or maybe this is my, or it was also that ego check. I mean, like, is this my ego? Am I looking at this from a place of ego, or my ego is bruised, or is this really I'm just feeling something like? And I think with microaggressions, like you said, they're really tough because I don't have like the vocabulary for it, but I would say they make you feel icky.
Yeah.
You just get some kind of like visceral response, and it something is not right. It doesn't sit well in you, and it's tapping into that inner feeling of it not sitting right. And like you said, sometimes you can't put words in it, but it's that feeling. You got to trust that feeling.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I had to like do that check in with myself. I was like, okay, this is not an ego thing. I really do feel that feeling, and because I've had that feeling before. So it's trusting that feeling. But then you see it's like I was trying to spin it. I'm like, okay, so what am I going to take what learning am I going to take from this to try to put some silver lining on it? But I know sometimes it's just an experience and it's part of life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had that same experience of like somebody feeling the need to double check your work. And there have been times where I feel like I've genuinely, made a mistake.
Right.
And I feel like the need to beat myself up for
Of
it, and
course.
feel the need to like overcorrect. And there was a time when I was very early on in my job where I felt like this moment of like complete panic,
Hmm.
where I felt like, okay, well, I'm just going to submit all of my work for like feedback or for like corrections
Right.
preemptively, so that I could feel like I was doing proactive
Hmm.
like self sort of regulation and self editing. And I did that to sort of appease this kind of anxiety that I had
Mm.
about not being good enough. And I felt like that was probably the biggest manifestation of that feeling, was just like, okay, I'm going to take ownership of this,
Hmm.
and I'm going to preemptively do all this work to try and hold back the criticism and look like I'm not having an ego problem by, raising these concerns about being micromanaged.
Of course.
But in the end, I never really got that sort of reassurance that no, you're good, you're fine, you're okay, and so allowing that feeling to fester and allowing that
That's a
feeling
tough
to
place to be
continue
in. Yeah.
is such a mind killer.
It is, because then you're left on your own to like sit with your thoughts, first of all. And then I think just like you said, it festers and it manifests. And sometimes we are looking for that, even though we should, again, that's a whole other thing, but we should, say like, don't look for that external, but we need to sometimes have that piece to like, is that it helps you gauge. And I'm thinking about your experience, my experience, like the same, my colleagues were actually telling me, you know, hey, our manager wants us to look over your work. She wants us to check the quality. Like those were the conversations. Those are the things being said. So when you hear those things, right, you start to question your own value, your own sense of, you know, worth, and all those things that are attached to it. And you said too, it's that dividing line of, okay, is this from ego or is this like anxiety? All these things are like interwoven in this, and I think it just like shows the complexity of who we are and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to come back to us for ourselves. I think for our own like peace of mind to like do that check in and be like, okay, no, I am good, and what I am producing is good enough. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And again, it's not to that the learning is not ongoing and it's not a collaborative process. It is, but I think at some point there has to be a fine balance between both of those things. I think for self-preservation, but also just overall wellness too, right? And knowing what we bring to the table and being confident in that. So
You gotta believe in yourself.
you absolutely, because I think I mean, it's like the energy you get, right? If you don't believe in yourself, then no one's going to believe in you. So you have to be your own best advocate and I guess cheerleader, so to
Yeah.
speak. But I think you're up now.
Yeah, that was a really good question. I really liked your answer.
Yeah. So,
Can you share your favorite memory from childhood of your time in Hamilton?
oh, I have so many. You know what? This is a very simple one, but it was growing up. I grew up in like the East End, Stony Creek area. So I would say one of my most fondest memories, honestly, just the simplicity of riding my bike in my neighborhood, playing with the neighborhood kids. I remember doing like, you know, double dutch and jump rope and just games like that. Just those fun things. I think I like see young kids like growing up now, and I feel like there's always some type of technology in their hands. It's a very different time, different generation. I'm not saying one is good or bad. It's just nice to like, you just went out and played and like, it was a much simpler time. And yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I was a street hockey kid.
Nice.
I would terrified of the ice, but I loved running around the street and just, playing hockey and, being with people who I didn't know their names. I didn't know, and to this day, I don't remember them, but I remember that feeling of just being, allowed to spontaneously play. That was just a wonderful thing. But an early childhood memory that I really still stick by is the summer reading program at the
Oh,
library.
that's awesome.
I grew up, so I grew up all over the city, but when I was like going through middle school, I lived near the Concession Street Library, and being able to make daily walks to the library and just sit and read forever, and bringing home these like plastic bags full of like
And
toys
stuff.
and stuff, and like being able to bring home like movies and VHSs and stuff like that, and being able to take advantage of the library
Hmm.
services as a kid who was raised by a single parent who, we had like at sometimes like no income, but we were still able to make do with this like library system and these services and this like this encouragement to read, which was something that I felt like I wasn't really getting from anywhere else, because all my friends were more athletes, they're more interested in sports, and so being interested in reading, I think that was what really propelled me to sort of start to sort of cultivate my imagination, and that's what my main method of art making
Hmm.
is by tapping into my
I love
imagination.
that.
So that's sort of my connection to my childhood that I think about a lot.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I really like that.
yeah. Shout out to the Hamilton Public Library.
Yes. It's funny because you made me think of my time with the library as well. An unsafe space for BIPOC people in Hamilton.
Um, it's not even a question. It's just naming names. Wow. Hmm. Gosh, that's a really heavy one. Because I feel like even before the pandemic, I was such a shut-in, didn't really go out. I don't drink, so
Hmm.
I don't go to bars, I don't go to clubs or anything like that. And so I have lots of stories from people I know and
Hmm.
people who I trust about experiences that they've had. But I think that wow, it's that's a really, really heavy
Hmm.
question.
Answer it in the way your heart feels.
Honestly, um, it just feels like I think there's a lot of spaces that have become unsafe
Hmm.
for everybody, but I think for me personally, I feel the most unsafe like when I'm in Gage or Gore Park
Okay.
because it feels like that's a space for a certain kind of like person to exist, person who is affluent, who has a family, somebody who's like fits within a certain kind of like paradigm. And it feels like sort of being a person in a space that's so like surrounded by
Hmm.
people. I think especially Gore Park, I think in a lot of cases it sort of becomes this kind of like space where there's just a lot of like just a lot of people. And I think that like what I tend to focus on primarily when I'm in public spaces is just like my size and my bigness. And so I'm a person who draws a lot of attention. And so by drawing a lot of attention, it feels like the attention is always negative. And so, being a person who is like a large person and being visibly BIPOC is like, such a trip because it's like you can't hide. You can't find anywhere to sort of like hide in the crowd
Hmm.
or anything like that because the crowd in the end to sort of it is the thing that is making you feel super seen,
Hmm.
super and hyper visible and hyper vigilant. So I think that that's probably one of the main things that I probably think about a lot as like a BIPOC person is just being outdoors, being in public. I think a lot about like the eyes that are on you
Hmm.
all the time. How about for you?
Um, yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, I was listening to and hearing what you were saying, and yeah, I'm sorry that's been your experience, but I love that you are creating space for yourself and still like just forging your path. Um, I'd say an unsafe space for BIPOC people. I'm gonna kind of similar to yours. This is based on like my personal experience growing up in Hamilton, but also just from hearing stories from friends and family. I would say I won't name a particular space, but I would just say maybe those areas of Hamilton. Hamilton is very diverse, but there's still some pockets that are maybe a little bit more homogenous, and some workplaces as well. And I think those kinds of spaces are still unsafe for BIPOC people because I feel like there's so many things I can. I'll end up talking forever on this, but I'll try to keep it really short. Just I think there's, but for me, I know for sure because of the lack of diversity and stuff, there is almost a need, I think, for BIPOC people to feel like they have to prove themselves, or they have to like push harder to like create space. And we always want to like hold space for people, but it's almost like you have to create that space and hold that space for yourself, and like prove your quote unquote your worth and your knowledge. And it's like you got to work extra harder as a BIPOC person to like fit in or to like find your sense of community or belonging. Um, and I think that definitely can lead to a sense of not feeling safe because if you can't feel like if you can't root into something or feel like you belong, again, it's there's also like we also know Hamilton has one of the highest rates of hate crime. So that as much as we know it is diverse and all these things, there's also that side, right? And I think we have to be very realistic about that. And I think it's sad to like see that that is a reality, but it really is. And
Yeah.
so I think where those instances have happened of things around hate crime. And I used to work with a hate crime unit, and I used to counsel individuals who are victims of hate crime. And I remember the stories I would hear, and it was just like I just want to like fit in, somewhere, and not having that space. I'm just like I have so many things I want to say. I'm just trying to like gather my thoughts, but it's if people could just take a moment. It's such a simple thing. It's we don't understand everyone's lived experience, and we may not relate, and we may not connect, but I think it's still extending that same courtesy, respect, inclusion, and I said just holding space for people, even if you cannot, like I say, cannot relate. Out of out of humanity. Like, let's create those spaces. Let's be more inviting, and let's have, why can't we use those opportunities instead of creating divisions, or it's like your group and my group, the whole us versus them. People are afraid to have conversations. People are afraid to not, and I don't mean people, like some people, afraid to tread into territory that is unknown. There's no growth and comfort cannot coexist in the same space. So if we want to push, and I don't mean just BIPOC we, I mean the collective we, everybody, everyone at the table has to push past that. And I think use those opportunities for learning. I think that's why self-reflection is so important. And I've probably just gone on a complete tangent of what the original question was, but again, it's just that I think having that self-awareness of what are our biases and stuff, and really checking in and be like, okay, where can I use this as an opportunity to learn and grow and maybe connect with someone I never thought I would before. And who knows what door that can open. You don't know what new friends you can make, or just something else you could learn about yourself or another community. And I think that's, really what life is all about, is about connecting. We're all connected in some way. We all want the same thing. We all want to belong. We all want to feel like we matter, and we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I love what you said about everybody doing their part, because it reminds me of this like adage that many elders have told me, which is that we are all treaty people, and the idea that in taking care of the land that takes care of us, you know, we all play a role.
I
It's
love
not
that.
just Indigenous people, it's not just BIPOC people, it's everybody.
Everybody.
And it takes because we all share the space, right? And so I think that
100%.
the difference is not necessarily between non-BIPOC folks and BIPOC folks. It's about who is, who's doing care work, who's putting other
That's it.
people before themselves, who's doing the work to, unseat a lot of prejudices and biases within themselves. And I think that that's more important than I think necessarily who is doing the work. I think it's everybody
So
should be
great.
doing the work.
Yeah, it's like that ripple. I think there's some type of saying, I'm probably not going to do it justice, but tying on to what you're saying, that whole ripple effect, right? You do one small thing, positivity and kindness is so contagious. It's like that when you throw that stone and it kind of ripples in the water. It's the same thing. You pay it forward. It's not even about paying forward. It's just doing something, just act out of the kindness and genuineness of your heart. And everyone, like you said, everyone being a part of it is the collective, because when you do it, then you might inspire somebody else. And like I said, it can create that ripple effect. And it's okay to not know. It's okay to not know where to start. But I think there are so many great places in Hamilton and people and communities to connect to, where you could start. Anyone could start anywhere, and just it's just wanting to. It's having that willingness to want to learn and be open, and contribute to safe spaces.
So, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Oh, that's a great question. Just really tough. I think the simplest thing, this too shall pass. It's such a simple, common, everyday, thing we've all heard. But I think for me, in where I'm at in my life right now, I'm understanding its value more and more, because so many things in life can happen, and it can bring us down, right? And good things can happen, right? But life is all about ebbs and flows, and each thing I believe that comes to us happens for a reason. And when we're in the bad times, sometimes it can just, when sometimes it rains, it pours, so it could be like multiple bad things. But I think keeping that perspective of this too shall pass is just something to anchor into, to know that, okay. And then I trying to reframe and just okay, what do I need to learn here? And then take the learning and just keep moving forward, and knowing that you're not going to be stuck in this space or whatever's happening forever, and giving that hope to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think the most important thing about that piece of advice for me is that it goes both ways. It's not just about good things, it's about bad things.
100%, yeah.
So I think part of what I think it really encompasses isn't just that there'll be good times and bad times. What I think it means is that good times can change into better times, and that, bad times can turn into good times, and everything in between, right? That there's the only constant is change. really.
Agreed.
And I love that so much is built into so little, like word wise. And yeah, it's a great piece of advice. I think um, I did The Artist's Way recently. Have you ever done The Artist's Way?
I've started that book, but haven't finished it.
Yeah,
It's on my list.
there's a great bit in it where you know, where the author Julie Cameron says um it's the creator's job to take care of the quantity, it's the quality, and
Mhm.
it's my job to take care of the quantity. So, you know, I interpreted that as just make stuff, just make
I love
things,
that.
and to not really worry about trying to control whether it's good or not, or whether it's received properly. It's my responsibility just to make things. And getting out of my own head and actually making things is probably the only difference between somebody who calls themselves an artist and
Hmm.
somebody who doesn't call themselves an artist.
Agreed.
You know, I'm 32 years old, and but I've been writing poetry since I was 12.
Wow.
Didn't call myself an artist until 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, no, and so, and you know, part of me was putting a lot of sort of like a lot of stock in the idea that, oh, I need to be published, I need to make my own stuff, I need to perform a lot, I need to go out more, I need to put myself out there more. Whereas the truth of it really was that I just needed to say that I was an artist
Hmm.
and I would become one. And that was even before I started writing poetry. You know, I've always been creative. I've always been a person who makes art and tries to put my imagination to
Hmm.
use, right? And I think, um, you know, worrying so much less about trying to be perfect and just trying to actually do things rather than just, you know, trying to come up with excuses to not do things because I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough whatever. I think that that was the real game changer for me. So
That's
worry
powerful.
about the quantity, not the quality,
I love that.
because with quantity comes quality. You have to be able to
With
fail a couple of
quantity
times.
comes quality. I like that.
Yeah.
Safe space for BIPOC artists in Hamilton.
I think there's a lot of really, you know, great places that I felt welcomed in. The library is one of them.
Hmm.
You know, I think that like there can be a lot of like there could be a lot of scariness around like the institutionality of the library, I
Right. Yep.
think. But stick around there long enough and you'll find something for you, even if it's just a quiet space to
Hmm.
be and exist. I mean, I think that's pretty important. Um, you know, and it can be a small library like the Concession Street Library, or it can be my home branch, which is the Kenilworth Library, or it can be Central Library. And there are so many branches all over the city that are of all different sizes. I
Hmm.
think that like I consider those places to be safe because yeah, you could just be yourself. You know, you can just be who you are. And I think that I've felt more than welcome in a library setting. So I would say that that's one
That's
place.
awesome. I love that. I I mean, not kind of, I do agree. I think there's quite a few safe spaces in Hamilton for BIPOC artists. I think there's a lot of, like I said, the library is one. So I've worked with some nonprofit organizations that have been super welcoming, and just like community galleries. And I think even just our grassroots artist groups and whatnot in Hamilton, especially I think in the downtown core, there are so many, like I said, communities and groups that are very welcoming. And I mean, we'll go like above and beyond. Like if you need a space, or you need an idea, or you need to connect, like you're looking for somebody who might be, an expert in something. You could just be like, oh, hey, I'm looking for someone maybe, or like just give me an example, like multimedia. I'm like, I know somebody, or let me get back to you. And then it's just such a network, and I feel like it's a beautiful community because you can tap into one person, and then they can tap into another person. I believe there's always like 6 degrees of separation.
Oh yeah.
And somehow in Hamilton, we're such a big city, but it's such a small city at the same time. So chances are that person that knows that person who knows that person, somehow you will have, worked with them in the past, or you will have run into them or have some connection. And I love that so much. And I think that also creates a big that sense of safety too, because I think artists in general are just artist groups are like just have that welcoming, warm vibe. I think because people who've gone through that journey know what it's like. You know, when you're like, say, if you're an emerging artist or trying to find a space to like, you know, exhibit your work, or maybe you want to sell or whatever it is, like it's those things, you know, to know that someone is welcoming you with opening arms, make you feel safe, not only as an artist, I mean, just as a community member too. That's really important. So I think that, yeah, that for me is what I would say for safe space.
That's good.
To you.
You're right. You're so right about the 6 degrees of separation.
Mhm.
You know, it's like I know some. If I meet somebody, it's almost certain that we have a friend in common or we have a colleague in
Yeah,
common.
it's uncanny. Like, and then you'll see how like you kind of meander through like your network, and you're like, okay, you know you, and I'm just like, wow, it's just it's so it blows my mind like how we're so connected.
For sure. And but there's always new people to meet.
Oh, always, definitely.
Who's the most famous person you've met?
Um,
That is an interesting one.
Most famous person you've met. I mean, fame is such a subjective thing too,
For sure.
you know?
Have you ever been starstruck by somebody who you've met? So maybe not somebody who's like super famous, like Dwayne the Rock Johnson or an actor or something, but somebody who you met and you were like, oh, like I got to meet this person and I was very
You know
excited.
what? No. You know what's funny? Like, I'm just thinking of a story. Like, I think I've seen like Tom Green. I've seen people, some famous people, but I didn't have that like. And maybe it's because not you know someone that was like I'm like would be a you know fangirling over.
Hmm.
But for me, you know, it's funny. I was just thinking of like because that's what made you think of like fame is so subjective. Like we all love different people, different things for different reasons. I actually had more excitement. I realized. I think it relates back to the rapid fire questions we had around like would you like to meet your ancestors. So I never got a chance to meet my great grandmother, my maternal great grandmother, but her sister was still alive. And when I was traveling to visit family abroad, I got a chance to meet her sister.
Wow.
And for me, that was more exciting. And that was like, not starstruck, but I was just so in awe. And I'm like, this woman is literally the sister of my great grandmother, someone I've descended from, my ancestor. And I've heard so many stories and, you know, a lot of similarities in like how we look. And so I was like, I don't know. It's such a, I can't explain the feeling, but just that warmed my heart like so much. For me, that was more important than meeting somebody famous because I will always carry that with me. I'll always treasure that. It was like one of my best memories, like that I'll always, you know, keep with me of um, that to me is like that quote a famous, important person. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think as somebody who, you know, has been connected to like some family members
Mhm.
for most of my life, like, you know, I know them, you know, they're there, they're
Right.
out there. But I think the most famous person I've ever met probably was, oh gosh, I've met a lot of professional wrestlers. I
Oh, so
joked
cool.
earlier about Dwayne the Rock Johnson, but I've met a
But
lot of
you're
I'm a huge wrestling fan.
oh, so cool.
And so I've met a lot of professional wrestlers. Like there's a local wrestling promotion called Alpha One Wrestling
Okay.
that like I've been to their shows for like the last 12 years.
Awesome.
And they've had wrestlers who are on national
Hmm.
television wrestle at their shows and who I've gotten to meet. So there's like a ton of them who I've met. And I think that like it's weird because as soon as you meet somebody, it's almost in that split second, they move from an idea to like a human being. And it's like, okay, so like they carry themselves this way.
This
They,
persona, right? Of
yeah, yeah. And so as soon as they become human, it's like, oh, well, you're just a guy who like,
just a person like
you
me.
know, who loves McDonald's or you know, like loves anime or something. And so you are just a normal person, just like I am. And so I sort of get that feeling that like meeting somebody famous is like a double-edged sword because you can run into somebody and you know, I've heard the horror stories about people who meet somebody famous and they were a jerk to them or
Yeah, and
something.
then it's almost like shatters that whole image you had of them, right? And
Yeah, but I'm actually kind of interested about like when we answered earlier, you brought it up the ancestors or
mhm,
descendants question. I think there's so much insight that I would like love to gain about myself from an ancestor,
that's amazing.
about like you know just anything from like the way that our hair grows or the you know like some of our favorite things or whatever, that I think an ancestor can impart upon
Hmm.
you that like
That knowledge, wisdom.
is more valuable than just like being awestruck by somebody who's famous. But
I'm with you 100% on that one.
but yeah, no, that's a very
And
good
sorry, I have
answer.
to ask, WWE or WWF?
It's a great question. I'm gonna have to say WWE
Okay.
because my grandmother was a fan. Speaking of ancestors,
I'm saying because I grew up in the time of WWF, so I was just curious as
yeah,
to.
my grandmother was a fan, but I didn't get into it until 2010.
Okay.
So well after her passing, and I think about like that's why I say about like interests because like she loves wrestling and I love wrestling. So we could have bonded over that when we were when had the
Hmm.
timelines arranged in such a way, right? And so, you know, part of me thinks about like, you know, the era that she was
Hmm.
watching wrestling and taking my mom to wrestling shows too.
That's
It's
amazing.
like, you know, being able to reminisce with
Hmm.
her and being able to show her things because now you have so much access to so much
Oh,
historical footage that
totally.
like,
Just go on YouTube.
yeah, part of me would love to just have gone back and had conversations with her about like her favorite memories and stuff, and maybe if she was a fan growing
Hmm.
up, and yeah, so I think that that's probably the thing that I'd like to discuss with her the most. What is the cringiest thing you've ever shared on social media?
That is a good question. What is the cringiest thing I've shared? Honestly, I don't think I've really posted anything cringe or cringe-worthy. I hope at least in my eyes, and maybe somebody else you can ask. I don't know if anyone follows my account, but um, because I think I'm very much in my head all the time, and I'm an introvert, so I'm always like analyzing and kind of so I always think about what I'm posting, or I try to put some thought and intentionality into what I'm posting and sharing because I feel like what you share with the world online is an extension of yourself. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't want to be posting like cringe content or stuff that I like look back and I'm like, oh God, why did I post that?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like again, I'm hoping, and this is what my intention when I'm putting it out there. I hope what I'm posting is thoughtful and or thought provoking, but in a good way. Some people may not agree, but like I said, I only post stuff that resonates for me, and I post for myself. Like if it's something I'm interested in or I want to share that I think people might benefit people. Like I'm really into positive psychology, so I like to post like quotes and just things to get us to think, and touching stories, anything art related. Yeah, so I'd say, like I said, I hope I'm putting that out there in the hopes that I've not posted anything cringeworthy, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
How about you?
I have done a lot of rehabilitating my idea of like, like you said, positivity and like trying to rethink and trying to give myself a lot of grace.
Yeah.
But I was on the internet very young,
Hmm.
and I've been on the internet for a very long time. I say I just, but like I had left Twitter last
Okay.
year, and first of all, I've never made a better decision than leaving Twitter. But part of the leaving of Twitter, part of it for me was going through my old tweets and deleting them.
Okay.
So I've read stuff that I wrote when I was like 17 that was just like it was never anything like super bad or anything
Hmm.
like super cringy or edgy, but I was definitely like very much in my own feelings.
Okay.
And a lot of what I would post was just no new messages today. Just just
Just that,
because nobody was DMing me, nobody was messaging me, and I feel like part of me on the other hand is just like you're gonna go on Twitter and complain that nobody's DMing you. It's like, come on.
eh?
But at the same time, when it was thinking about it now, it's just like I was just a very
Mm.
alone kid, so I don't judge on him like that. I don't judge him for being dejected and being angsty about
Mhm.
being alone. I give him a lot of grace because, at the time, I was, you know, going to school, far away, and I didn't have any like really close
Mhm.
friends really. And the friends that I did have at school, they were just school friends. They wouldn't message me. They wouldn't hit me up on MSN. They wouldn't message me on Facebook or anything. They were just friends I had at school. And so trying to develop a sense of community at the time was just really hard. And there's like a loneliness epidemic now. And
For
so,
sure, there is.
you know, instead of just writing, you know, posts about like not getting messaged, now we're seeing like young people talk about how they don't really have a community, and even adults,
Yeah,
you know, adult friendships is such a huge topic right now. So, you know, part of me wants to sort of say like kind of like shrug and like give myself the side eye when I was like 18 or whatever, but at the same time, I think, you know, it's a real thing to
it
sort of
is.
like feel dejected, and being honest on social media is seen as cringy and seen as like this like overstepping of boundaries, but I think, you know, we're social creatures by nature and
Yeah.
we're honest creatures by nature. So I think being able to be honest about the feelings that we're having is such an important thing. And as long as we're not saying something, that epidemic of loneliness is still going to continue.
Agreed, agreed. And I love that you gave yourself some grace,
Hmm.
because I think that's a part of being young too, right? You don't, sometimes we don't always have a vocabulary to like express how we feel. It's just, it's a feeling, but as you get older, right, experience always teaches us, it gives us more wisdom. So it's awesome that you were able to like take that frame of reference and then look back and be like, you know, that was my experience. That's probably why I shared that. And it's not cringe, right? They say it's real, it's authentic, and everybody has different ways of expressing themselves. So I think extending that grace to other people too who want to share, maybe that is their safe space.
Yeah.
Maybe there is no sense of community and that's their way to connect with others, like you said. And we are in an epidemic of loneliness, especially since the pandemic. And we are social creatures, and social media has become a lot of people's ways of communicating and sharing stuff. And if you're having that experience, chances are there's lots of other people, or myself included, maybe just too shy or whatever, for whatever reason people don't want to share, some do. Either way, it's okay. Everybody has to do, at the end of the day, what's right for them and what makes them you know, feel okay. I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing for sure. So I
Absolutely.
love what you shared though. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is John Hill. My pronouns are he and they. I'm a poet, an artist, a sound artist, and a mixed media artist. I'm also a zinester, and I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario. I, my family's from Six Nations of the Grand River. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation and Turtle Clan, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi everybody, my name is Lena Sarada. I'm a visual artist, an educator, speaker, and I do a lot of art education around expressive arts. Born and raised in Hamilton. Love the city holds a special place in my heart because this is, I think, where the roots of all of my art practice and what I do and all my sources of inspiration have come from.
You can find me on Instagram at Bedroom Punk. I'm a zinester, and so I'll be having a zine coming out later this summer about music and about the culture of creating music within your own home. And so I'll look forward to that. And I guess any final words is just don't worry about the quality, worry about the quantity.
You can find me on social media. I'm at lena.theartist on Instagram, and you can find all of my website and everything else there to stay connected with me. I do a lot of paint workshops and stuff through the Burlington and Hamilton area. My work will be on exhibit. You can follow all of my exhibits and projects that I'm working on social media. And I just like to say, for me, with art, one of my favorite quotes that is sort of like my tagline is, every canvas tells a story, because I believe art is such a powerful medium for sharing our stories, not only ones that are, you know, come from inside, but I think ones that come from the outer world that influence, you know, what we see, what we feel on a daily basis, and art is just a medium to express that. I think it's, we say writers have the pen and artists have the brush, and that's our tool to express our feelings and, yeah, just that creativity.